This morning, I've taken a few verses. I'm going to talk about a few verses from the Trimsatika, Karika, I think it's the Sanskrit, or the 30 verses of Vasubandhu, a 4th century. I think he was born in the 4th century sometime. Scholar, monk, sage, who wrote about the nature of consciousness and contributed, practically created the whole Yogacara approach to practicing the teachings of the Buddha. And lots of translations of this, and I like this particular one. I'm not sure who did this one, but it's kind of a combination of things, and the first one is the title that we gave this, As Long as Consciousness Does Not See. As long as consciousness, you're using it right now. See this? You're seeing. Your consciousness, you're hearing, you're feeling your butt on the floor of the cushion, or maybe you're standing. So you're experiencing your life, your livingness, your beingness through the 6 sense consciousnesses, the objects there, the sounds, the sights, the smells, the tastes, touch, and also thoughts coming and going. Everything is proceeding towards you, you could say. And this is saying, as long as consciousness that does not see that subject-object, object, and in your case, it would be the other way around. Subject, object, the whole world, everything else is other, self and other. We jump right into thinking that those are separate by way of warfare, by way of argument, by way of taking advantage of someone, or going the other way around and thinking we're the blame for everything. Same thing, just a different dynamic of the same kind of confusion about the nature of reality. As long as consciousness does not see that subject-object distinctions are simply forms of consciousness. They're just forms arising in consciousness. Along with this sound that just rose in consciousness. Your sense that there's a self is arising in consciousness. Your self that there's an other is arising in consciousness. Not a big deal. No bigger deal than that. But we make it one. We emphasize that. I'm losing, or I'm really getting ahead. I think I'm ahead of the game. I think I got it now. I think I'm going to win. I'm one of the best people I've ever met. As long as consciousness does not see that subject-object distinctions are simply forms of consciousness, the attachment to twofold grasping will never cease. The attachment to a self, me, we do it all the time. You know, when you have a sad feeling, that's attachment to a self. And not to be gotten rid of. This is a misunderstanding. Trying to end your negative feelings will take you in circles and you'll spin for the next 15 lifetimes. I like it, I don't like it. It's good, it's bad. I should, I shouldn't. Blah, 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 blah. The whole world runs on this particular model of reality, and it is, to use a Sanskrit word, wrong. I almost used the actual Sanskrit word. Attachment to twofold grasping will never cease. And he goes on to say, this amazing teacher from the 4th century, who was astonishing. And he's, when you did this long list of boring names, his was one of them. One of the early names around the 4th century. He says, by merely thinking that objects one perceives are forms of consciousness. In other words, just conceptualizing that, one does not realize consciousness only. So you can think that, you could teach that, you could learn all about this, and you could actually teach Vasubandhu, like I'm doing, pretending to know something. By merely thinking the objects one perceives are forms of consciousness, one does not realize consciousness only. One realizes consciousness only when the mind no longer seizes on any object. So the object is there, but there's no grasping. The object is there, but there's no rejecting. So one of the ways you can notice the way in which you grasp is find something that is an opinion. An opinion is something you think is true with no proof. This is grasping. Very subtle, thin as tracing paper, but it's there, and it will disturb your happiness. When one realizes consciousness only, when the mind no longer seizes on any object, this is the kind of seizing, I mean grasping or rejecting or shutting down. Don't do anything with any objects. Anything that arises, just observe. This is the logic around, if you want to call it that, around holding still and looking at the wall. In other words, you're sitting down, you're looking at the wall. Is that our delivery? It's going off in the distance. Perception only. You're not separate from that. We're not separate from that. You're not separate from the feelings that arise around it, like that's wrong, he should have shut off his phone. No, he shouldn't. He's waiting for a call that he needs to take. So, you were wrong. So was I. I thought he should shut off his phone too. So, one realizes consciousness only when the mind, your thinking process, wherever that's located, no longer seizes. And the kind of seizes is not just the grasping part, but the rejecting part. That's a kind of seizing on something. To say no, or get that out of here, or cut its throat. Anything you do with anything that's arising is delusion. And I'll follow that up with, don't believe anything I say. Don't disbelieve anything I say. Don't do anything with it. Listen, hang out with it, see what happens. If it touches you in a way that seems to be important, you won't be able to ignore it. And if it doesn't, maybe it's not time for you to contemplate this kind of material. Go do something else. Get a degree in Eastern religion. When one realizes consciousness only, when the mind no longer seizes, that means accepting, rejecting, shutting down the three poisons, on any object, when there is nothing to be grasped, there is no grasping, then one knows, what is that about? Then one knows everything is consciousness only. Another way of saying that is not separate. I hesitate to go so far as to say we're all one. That's ego's language, self-centered language. And it stops investigation. And then the 29th verse, and this is of the 30 verses of Vasubandhu, the 29th verse is, that is the supreme world-transcending knowledge. That is the supreme world-transcending knowledge where one has no mind that knows, no object that is known. Abandoning twofold grasping, the storehouse consciousness, or the alaya vijnana, which some of you have studied, we've talked about here before. The storehouse of consciousness is empty. It's just a way of talking about it. Probably nothing happens. That alone is the pure primordial reality, beyond thought, auspicious, unchanging. It is the blissful body of liberation, the dharmakaya nature of the enlightened one. So a little bit of promotion stuff on the end of it. But it's just saying this is the release from suffering. And no promises. There's no promises of anything. This is not something to believe in or disbelieve. Just look at it. See if this fits with your particular activity as you live your life. When one realizes consciousness only, when the mind no longer seizes on any object. How do you do that? You know how the only way you can really do that is to sit down and witness the way, like I said in the meditation instruction this morning, witness the way you keep believing your thought patterns. Something arises and you either want to push it away, it's not true. That's belief. When you think something is not true, you believe it's not true. Belief. Grasping. Knock it off. And when I say that, of course, what I'm saying is dedicate a little bit of your 24 hours a day to training the mind. Train. In other words, sit down, find out what this is. This is not something that, there's nothing to believe in over here. You don't have to believe in this guy or anything I say. Don't do it. Listen to what I'm saying. Look at your own life, and the Buddha dharma is available to you in your mind, whether you're a Buddhist or not. You don't have to call it Buddha dharma. It seems to be helpful to have a lot of forms and structure, because that we shouldn't come up to them and ask them how we can help them, because they're in a different stage of life. But if you're 19, 20, 22, 25, 35, you're what's called an adult. So I could say to you, grow up. In other words, be responsible for what happens in your mind stream, in your brain pan, whether it's in the frontal lobe or wherever it's at. You can't locate consciousness anyway. Be responsible. When I say, I mean respond or respond. It's the ability to respond. It's not blame. It's not credit. It's just whatever happens, it's yours. Whatever happens out there, it's yours. It's not out there. There is no out there. Don't believe that. Don't disbelieve it. And then there's an open dimension in whereby you can consider that. You could look at that and say, is there an out there? What'd that old man say? So because of my energy or my enthusiasm around this, it may look like I'm trying to sell you something. I am trying to communicate something to you. If you're open, if you come in here and sit down, you give me permission. If you tune in on YouTube, you give me permission to let you have it. And what I'm letting you have is with the help of Vasubandhu, who said this so eloquently, even in translation. It's just an amazing combination of words. Originally written in Sanskrit. So, going back to the very first line, as long as consciousness. So, again, we went through the whole thing about the grasping part, the rejecting part, and the shutting down part. As long as consciousness does not see that subject-object distinctions, me and you, or me and the world, or my feelings and your feelings. Subject-object distinctions are simply forms of consciousness. It's just consciousness only. It's just consciousness. There's no self or other in it. Those are fabrications that arise in the consciousness. You don't have to get rid of them. You don't have to fluff them up. You don't have to shut down on them. You don't have to do anything but just observe. And if you do that enough, and there's no guarantee, but the way it looks here, if you do that enough, eventually there will be some kind of a breakthrough. Again, no guarantee at all. That may not happen until 3 lifetimes from now on another planet. And I'm not kidding you. It's a much, much bigger universe than just this little ball of dirt, the third rock from the sun, floating around. Big ball of fire in the middle of nowhere. Doesn't that seem a little odd to you? It does to me. Since I first heard about that when I was 5, I thought, that's very strange. Why did I come back here? Blink, blink, blink. Finish your cereal. Okay. Questions are good. You have them.
I have 2 questions. The first one is, what are the characters on the front of those little clackers that you? What do those mean?
Those are Chinese pictograms, and it says, when you put them together, it says silence. Isn't that clever for me to do that? No one's ever asked me that before. I don't think. Have you asked me that? No, I probably told you. Guess what this means?
And the other question
Yes.
Was about the dependent nature of self and other. Are the causes for the self and other to arise related?
Well, it's so complicated. There's things banging in all the separations. We're not saying that there aren't separations. It's just that the separations are not don't mean there are separate things. Things are this is separated into aspects, just like the five skandhas, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, and all the other things that you can separate into aspects of something that is not separate. It's when we grasp at that it becomes a problem. Or either grasp to pull it into our territory and control it or manipulate it, or grasp it to reject it and get rid of it and be done with it. I understand your question. You have to say it more clearly.
Yeah, it is the concept of self
Yeah.
dependent on having a self, dependent on this form.
This is a body. So the body, speech, mind, organs, and everything that's here is it's like a consciousness just shrinks down into a person, and then you die and it goes back into who knows where. Different for every consciousness, depending on it's a dependent origination. So everything is dependent on everything else for its apparent separation or identity. You notice that if you hold up your hand, you don't see a toe here. You see all fingers. You didn't do that. You didn't figure that out and say, whoop, no, I want to make sure I don't put a toe here. Although occasionally you'll see people's hands that look like feet. It's rare. Those people usually wear gloves. Michael. No, we got two Michaels here. Go ahead.
The objects,
Yes.
are they the cause of perception or the result of perception?
You could track it that way. You could say that things are caused. There's causes and conditions that are happening all the time. And the understanding is just to stay with the perception rather than jump into the object or jump back into the perceiver. I'm seeing this. I'm feeling this. You'll notice how anytime you have a feeling, there's an uninspected relationship to some person or some identity who is having that. And we reify this all the time by just saying I like this, I don't like this. The personal pronoun is something you don't apply to anyone else. You apply it to yourself. So the very language structure itself supports that. Japanese don't use the personal pronoun I so much, a lot less, a little bit. I think it's watashi or watashi. Good question? Mm-hmm.
How do we stay with the perception?
Yeah, how do we stay with the perception? You actually don't have to maintain it. That's great. You don't have to maintain it. The practice part is, you could say, is kind of a returning to it. Like your mind goes here and here. I mean, let's say this is your mind or your thoughts were my hands, and they go, we sit, and we're here for a minute or 2 minutes, and then we kind of go off into some stuff. Then we actually abandon our body. Our consciousness and the body are not separate, yet they can be separated. It's almost like magic. It is magic. And they go off like this, and all you have to do is you're sitting and then just return. You just see that you're off through the contrast of you're sitting here holding very still, and boom, you don't even have to try to return. You're just back. So the maintenance is nothing more than awareness. If you just emphasize the awareness rather than what arises in it. So awareness is like a big room and the thoughts and so on are like furniture. Some of them are very overstuffed. So you could just be with that, let that go. You don't have to necessarily try to bring it back. If you try to bring it back, which some forms of meditation work that way, label thinking, return to the out breath. Label thinking where they're trying to create a meditator identity. Not incorrect, do that. But I'd say if you just sit still, hold still, you'll have just enough maintenance of that kind of thing for you personally. Everybody doesn't need to do that. Some people do need to probably do that. They're probably talking to somebody who teaches that. More?
I feel like I've done that with politics. I was in politics a lot, and I've lost like complete like faith in it. Is that sort of like realizing that politics really don't matter?
Well, it's not so much that it matters or doesn't matter. That's part of the problem. It's like it doesn't matter is like don't believe that anymore. That's like the other end of the polarity. So I would say don't do anything with it. Don't reject it. Don't accept it. You might, if you find yourself getting involved in politics, there's probably some kind of something tugging you that way. You can also just not get into it.
Same with my like recovery. Like I am around alcohol and stuff.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem to affect me as much as I thought
Yeah.
it would.
You just given a great example of you had a recovery situation where you were whatever the word is, addicted or something to something, and because your dynamic has changed in some fundamental way, you're no longer pulled in that direction. But there's no guarantee. There's cycles going on that are totally invisible, and there's cycles that can come around that if you could say relax and try to think, well, I got this. When you go there, then the next thing that happens is invisible to other people, bad weather. And suddenly you're in an emotional turmoil. You don't even know where it came from, and then we start looking for our old friend. So I would just keep sitting. Rachel.
Two-part question, yes.
Yeah.
So from what you've read, when you say that the object and subject are just consciousness, do we manifest the separation between ourselves and other in our own consciousness?
Yeah, we make it up.
So then the second part would be when you say our body, our physical form, mind, all of this here is just consciousness condensed down to a single space.
It's a way of talking about it, yeah.
But how can something be separate but not separate? And if that's the case, does that mean that consciousness as a whole is all condensed into one body for one person, or that each person shares a piece of the same consciousness?
Both and neither. That's why it's so difficult. That's why it's a spiritual path rather than a mundane path. It's not the kind of path where you can get a degree in philosophy. That's something you can be tested on. You can't be tested on this. This is a transcendent. It goes beyond cause and effect. It goes into reality, which is without time and space. There's no space, no time. Space is an illusion. Time is an illusion. They're unreal from the point of view of ultimate reality, which is what we're talking about here. So it's a way of talking about it. We condense down into this form, and then we're born, and then we live in terms of the causes and conditions that we buy into or reject or shut down on, and our karma moves us along. More?
So ultimate reality is not a separate thing. It's all around us. It's just the illusion of the physical form.
Yeah, that's kind of it.
In a sense, maybe.
Yeah. Sit a lot. Well, you were here before, so sit, stop, hold still, spend a lot of time sitting. You don't have to join the Buddha club. You don't. I mean, really, you don't have to. I think it helps to do that. If you are put off by the forms that are used here, you're actually more attached to the. I mean, it's an imaginary kind of made-up being that is running around with some kind of, sensitivity to everything. And you don't have to do anything with it. And then it may hang around, it may not. What it really will do, if it has been talked about especially in the Tibetan tradition, is that when one becomes realized that on the bodhisattva path, or that path is dedicated to helping others, the ego is returns in the position of serving, helping, saving all beings. So the ego, because the ego can, someone who has transcended all this is, what are they going to do? Sit around and look at the clouds? You know, if you're living in some kind of ultimate situation, there's not a lot you can do because you're too far gone or detached from the whole thing. So you come back. You realize it, but then you come back into it, and your ego, if it's necessary, it shows right up. It pops right up and does whatever it needs to do. More, Anna Maria?
I'm not at the moment.
Is that two parts?
Well, it's almost an either or.
Oh, I like.
Can you have a body without a self, or can you have body without self? If yes, or if so, what is body without self?
I don't know. Did I answer it?
I don't know.
Shoshi.
Is the ego that returns for someone who's transcended?
Hasn't gone anywhere, actually. But go ahead.
No.
Keep coming. I can't do anything without your help.
What was my question?
If the ego has been transcended.
Oh, right, the return, but it doesn't return.
Yeah.
Both returns and doesn't return because it
Yeah.
doesn't go anywhere.
That's right.
What is, how does this ego function with respect to others who have not transcended?
It doesn't separate from them. Nothing is separate. Someone who sees this is all done trying to be a better person, a person who's above the fray and no longer has difficult feelings and is kind of above, kind of superior, kind of real subtle, like, I've transcended myself, too bad for you guys. Yeah. So one who has done this is completely, as it is said in the ancient Zen tradition, returns to the marketplace. Just another hobo in the marketplace. Except they don't operate, they only operate to serve others. So their interaction with anybody is always for the benefit of that person. And fundamentally raises their, ever so slightly, their awareness about what is fundamentally true, rather than adding to their confusion, going to war with them, or objecting to them, or even criticizing them. You have to be very careful about criticizing anyone. If someone is not ready to receive what you have to offer, they will go to war with it. And you just are creating further and further circularity called samsara. So be with all things, yes.
Could you do a comparison between transcending and going, or trying to capture?
I think the word transcendence it means that you've gone beyond the thing that you were stuck on. You've actually transcended self and other, gone beyond that. But to actually go beyond that means that you haven't left it, because it's ultimate, because you see that the ultimate nature of this situation is not separate from the relative nature. It's not too it's not too so far out that you can't. There's nothing left to sweep off the floor. You've swept everything off, and you see that it's still a floor, and you still have a broom in your hand, and it's going to get dirty again.
And how
Sweep
is
it
that,
again. Huh?
and how is that different from going or getting?
It's the same. It's not different from it. It's the same thing. But that's the discovery that we make, is we see it's perception only. So we transcend something, and we haven't gone anywhere. You go ahead.
So in that transcendency, there is no cause then?
Maybe some. Dirt on the floor.
Pardon?
Dirt on the floor. Needs sweeping. It's like the old saying in Zen is, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Or is it chop water, carry wood? You know what I'm saying. Yes,
Question from Shane out in Santa Ana, California.
I know him.
He asks, how do you work with ego when it tries to hijack the bodhisattva path?
Don't fight with it. If you can see that that's what's happening, then just watch it, because you need to watch it to see how the mechanics of how that works, and the mechanics of how that works for you personally is going to be different than someone else. You can't read a book about this. I mean, you can read a little bit, but you really need to do it yourself. That's why it's so much emphasis, at least in our Sangha, and this with people who are studying in this with this situation, are encouraged to sit, do sitting meditation as much as possible. The concepts help, and the teaching situation encourages us to go back. Working with a teacher helps, but the most powerful thing you can do is when you're alone, you sit down, you're alone, you watch the mind. You can do this yourself. It's a do-it-yourself, a transcendental do-it-yourself project, but you might need to work with someone else who's been doing this for a while. As they say, you want to go up the mountain, find the person who goes up and down on it all the time. Not the person who stays at the top and yells down at you. Be perfect like me.
What action benefits awareness?
Don't do anything. As I say, as kind of simple-minded as it sounds, don't do anything unless you have to. And if you're doing something you don't have to do, then you're not really looking at it clearly, because it's like gambling. Well, if I do this, maybe this will happen. If I do this, maybe that. Maybe I can get this if I do that. But if you don't do anything unless you have to, then the space starts to clear, and you start to see more clearly right where you're at. You realize that this isn't so bad right here, sitting on a cushion, or even sitting at home watching television. That's an awareness practice also. It's not something that's bad that you should avoid. On the other hand, if you don't want to do that, well, don't do it. You don't have to do it, don't do it. I actually have to watch TV. I'm serious, I do. I watch news all the time, and I also don't do anything about it. Well, I complain, don't I? Yeah, when you would know. But that's okay. I don't have to not complain. What?
Follow-up question from Shane.
Shane.
He says, okay, so you see how it works, the ego. Then what? You don't want ego meddling with people's lives, right? Or is that part of the path?
Wait a minute, he said right. You don't want.
You don't
read
want
that again.
Okay.
Read that without saying right in there. See if it comes together better for me.
Okay. Okay, so you see how it works. Then what? You don't want ego meddling with people's lives. Or is that part of the path?
Or.
Right.
I still got a true or false question. What? Can you translate that for me? So it makes
Well, you see how ego works.
I'm very slow.
But you don't want ego meddling with people's lives.
Okay, let's start there. Okay. Yeah. So don't do anything. Oh, there he is. Don't do anything, Shane. Stop. Just look at what's there. There's all kinds of things happening that are not about your thought pattern about liking this, not wanting that, not wanting to meddle. You have the sense of touch. You have the color that someone is wearing. You have the shape of your cat's butt as it leaves the room. There's a cat, doesn't he? I mean, you have things happening. The world is actually happening at the same time. You might be down on not wanting to meddle with something. I'm sure that was helpful to him.
We have to close.
Did that help, Shane? We have to go? Why?
The world awaits.
Oh, the world awaits. Okay, what's next then?
We'll dedicate the merit.
Okay, let's do that.
In the back of your Brew Champ books is a dedication of merit. And would like to remind everybody about our donation boxes in the hallway for Sokukoji and for specific donations for Sokuzan, as well as we can now take plastic, not plastic water bottles, but on the square.
May this penetrate into all places so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Ji-ho-san shi-chi-hu Shizon bu-sa-mo-ko-sa Mo-ko-ho-ja-ho-ro-mi. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita.
O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions of the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.